Hello, everybody. I am Kate Fantanel or Lady Liberty, and this is Shooting the Breeze. I didn't know what to call it. I've been thinking about starting a podcast for a long time now, and there's so much to talk about, especially in relation to firearms, which I'm very passionate about. So I thought, why not? I'm just going to do it. I'm just going to jump in. I've got three fantastic blokes that I've met through the shooting and hunting community who have blessed me with their presence today. And we're going to talk about a lot of things, but the pressing issue is the Western Australian gun laws that come out next week. First, let me introduce my guest tonight. I have from my birth state of South Australia, Zach Williams from Hunting Connection podcast. Hi, Zach. How are you?
G'day, Kate. Yeah, good. Thank you. Yourself?
I'm good. There seems to be a bit of delay.
Am I
Maybe
there?
yes, you are there, but there's a delay. The feed's already been hacked. It's okay. I thought this would happen. We'll just press on. I also have a top bloke that I haven't actually met yet, but I feel like I already know him through his TikTok reels and use of Instagram. His name is Jock McQueen. He's up in sunny Queensland. How are you, Jock?
Yeah, not bad yourself, Kate.
Not too bad. You got your party shirt on for me. That's lovely. And
Oh, I live in
then
trademarks. I live in trademark shirts. Yeah.
and then I have a man who needs no introduction. He is an absolute powerhouse. He's well known within the shooting and hunting community. I was saying before the show, I had a man say to me at the range he bought one of his guns because of him, and I hear it all the time. He is my dear friend, Ozzie Reviews. How are ya?
I'm really well, thanks, and thanks for the opportunity to chat to everyone and obviously meet some new people in the whole industry that I haven't met before.
Yeah, there's a lot of us out there, and we seem to be doing a lot. There's a lot of podcasts popping up and YouTube channel. Like Ozzy, you've been doing it for so long on your YouTube channel, and now we've got TikTok, which I don't have because it's owned by the CCP. Yes, I'm red pilled. It's fine. But we're all doing our bit in our own way. So I just wanted to have a platform and a place where we can have a discussion together and just have a chat about the state of the world. We'll try not to get too upset about it, but I'm already getting upset because I am in Western Australia. And if you own a gun in Western Australia, you are in trouble. Next week, as I said, the new gun laws are being tabled in Parliament. It's not good because Labor have total control of both houses. It wouldn't be that much better if it was Liberal, but we won't go there just yet. So I just wanted to you guys are obviously in other states, but you've heard about what's going on in WA. Jock, I was watching your TikTok reel just before. Give us another spiel. Give us a serve. What's going on in WA from your perspective?
Oh, it's just seems to be redundant voting, consistently voting the same party, and they're not really caring about the people in any way, shape, or form. Like, it's vote for what mining wants, and that's it in WA.
So how did you hear about what they were doing to the gun laws?
I can't remember the name of the podcast, but it was a short from a podcast. They were talking about one of the people on the podcast was literally had like 20 firearms and they were going to be reduced to 5. It's like, well, what?
Yeah. So just going back a step, it's been a long march towards disarmament here in Western Australia, starting with the caliber bans, where around 260 firearms were confiscated off of law-abiding firearm owners. And I've had a lot of veterans contact me saying that they were the ones who were disarmed by the government because of the ban. And when they announced the ban, it was because the police were worried that people would snipe at police officers. So we had the police going to the government of the day saying, we don't think citizens should own these guns anymore because we are scared this will happen. Now, they didn't present any evidence to show that there was going to be an incident of that occurring. Nevertheless, we've had a ban and there's 280 firearms were removed from the community. 56 types of firearms have since been banned and 19 calibers as well. Ozzy, I know you get a little bit political, which is why I love ya. What did you think when you heard about this?
It didn't surprise me. If we can kind of rewind a little bit there, for many, many years, we've been talking about the whole disarmament And for those of us that were around in 96 as an adult, I certainly was, and I certainly lost firearms then. And I remember John Howard saying at that time, and he reassured all of us that, you know, that this was not the path or the start to any kind of disarmament. And his words were, you know, ladies and gentlemen, I assure you that this is not the position of the government. It is just the semi-automatics. I'm sorry, there's no other way. We need to get semi-automatics. And there was a lot of pushback then. And then there was a lot of deals being done, even with different shooting groups to try to divide them and win over parts of them, while other parts can be pushed out onto the fringe. You know, it's the old divide and conquer tactic. And then what's happened ever since then is we've seen everything, you know, that is disarmament. People will often say, oh, you know, that's over the top and all the rest of it. Look up the dictionary meaning of disarm or disarmament. It means to take weapons or firearms from a person or a body. So whether that's from the military or whoever. So that's exactly what we've seen in my view, because there's no other way to explain it. We had bans and disarmament with handguns in 2003. Then that continued on. They weren't happy with that. So then what did they do? They then went down the path of limiting firearms with magazine capacities. Then they didn't stop there, as we all know. It then continued on to cosmetic appearance. Different firearms were simply banned, whether it be from import or some firearms in some states here banned simply because of the cosmetic appearance. So regardless of how that action worked, even if it was exactly the same as a compliant firearm, because they don't like the cosmetic appearance of it, that was banned. So they were removed from a lot of shooters as well. Then obviously we had, after that, we had the lever action shotgun debacle. So then they removed shotguns that were over 5 rounds in a lever action capacity or configuration, sorry, I should say. So, you know, we just keep going down the line. Now here in Queensland, what we've seen over the last couple of years is we've seen disarmament of farmers. They changed the guidelines with category H for farming here from a minimum of 500 acres, which it was for many, many years and no problems whatsoever. So then what they did, they upped it to 5,000 hectares. So there was I very much got my nose out of joint with that. And I encouraged a lot of my followers to write ministerial complaints about it. And then they backtracked very quickly and said, oh, no, we didn't mean hectares, we meant acres. Well, still 5,000 acres. You know, so that's what it is currently, 5,000 acres. So they've used policy when they can't get legislation across the line to be able to disarm people even further. So, you know, my view on it is that's exactly what's going on in WA. Sorry to sort of backtrack a little bit there, but I wanted to paint the picture. So with WA, with what's happening there is absolutely no surprise. Shooters have fallen asleep at the wheel. They don't unglue their backsides from the couch and get out there and be political because they seem to think that they'll be locked up in some political asylum or something. No, it is your right to go out there and peacefully protest. We live in a democratic society. You're allowed to have your views and opinions, provided you're not, you know, saying you want to kill people or you want to hurt people. Then, you know, your views and opinions are your own, and you're quite, you know, constitutionally able to express that by the way you vote and political parties that you'd like to follow. So this is where I encourage all shooters to be able to do that and be very vocal about it, because a lot of the time it is because nothing is said. All these laws get made and they just go through, because what happens, like most of the time that we've had any sort of legislative changes, we have a handful of shooters who will get up and actually do something, but it's not enough. So say, for example, out of 200,000 shooters, you only get, say, 50 of them that write letters or, you know, show some protest. Well, what does the government do? They go, they're just a fringe. They're just the fringe of the shooters. They're a fringe group or a fringe portion. So we won't worry about them. But if you had 200,000 shooters stand up, all write letters, go into their local member of parliament, have a meeting with them, and just because they don't return your phone call, don't just give up. You actually lob up down there and politely say, look, I'm a member within your electorate. I would like to have an appointment with you to discuss matters. And don't give up. If all of us did that, we wouldn't be anywhere near where we are. So sorry for the long-winded response there, but that's my view on the Western Australia situation.
No, thank you, Ozzie. And going back to when it came out in WA, that's why I ran for the Senate on a campaign of give gun owners a fair go, is because I was sick of no one doing anything. It was outrageous that they doxed the entire database of 90,000 people and put addresses on the front page of the paper. I'm getting fired up again. Every time I talk about this, I get so upset because it put us at risks in our own homes. And that's why I ran for the Senate. And I said it at the time. That's all I wanted to campaign on. Like, I know people who don't agree with everything I do in terms of my libertarian beliefs, and I'm not part of the Libertarian Party anymore because I know people have issues with that as well. But that's why I ran. I just put myself out there and said, no, enough is enough. And since then, it's only gotten worse. Interestingly, I got 30,000 votes out of 90,000 shooters. And admittedly, it was a very short campaign with not much money. But, you know, I tried to do what I could. And there are other people out there also trying to fight. But it's getting bad in WA. And Zach, we talked about this on your podcast a little bit, this culture of being a little bit gun shy to say that we're hunters and shooters.
Yeah, we did.
So you go about that in a very different way, which is through showing your hunting pictures to people and talking about how you do it for food. Is that something that you encourage others to do as well? And how successful have you been with that?
It's a tricky one because, you know, sharing hunting and firearms stuff online tends to get people fired up as well. So, you know, you get all these anti-hunters, anti-shooters. So seeing guns and animals online and posting trophy photos up, quote unquote trophy photos, where you're there grip and grin, holding a deer or a goat or something like that, and you're smiling. That's all they're seeing. So some people get upset with that, where people that hunt realize what's gone into the photo beforehand. So it's a hit and miss when it comes to that type of thing. I think the food aspect side of everything is really a really great way to show things in the hunting side of things. And we did see a big increase of hunters and shooters over COVID due to that whole food aspect of things, which has been really great. And the more people I speak to on a daily basis, whether it's at work, you know, chatting to different customers, or just different messages that I get from people that start listening to the podcast, they seem to like grow to that food aspect and self-sufficiency side of things.
Yeah. What about you, Jock? What's your involvement in the sport? You're a hunter?
So most of mine's sort of based back towards pest management, like working on cattle stations and whatnot. And I also have with dogs as well. So like I look at I look at it as a hobby as well as getting food and everything. But for me, predominantly, it's a pest management thing. Like, you know, I enjoy nothing more than killing cats. Like, cats just like the best thing to kill for me. Today, got 4 pigs, and you know that's just a great day for me. But um, yeah, like as much as like I like to shoot deer and things like that, that's sort of like a very uncommon thing for me. I've probably shot 5 deer for my whole life. Whereas pigs and dingoes and cats and things like that, they're sort of my main target species.
And you do that as a way of protecting the environment, basically. That's why you're out there
Especially
doing.
pigs and cats. Pigs and
Yes.
cats so much, yeah.
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 Because whereabouts are you in the world? In Queensland?
In central Queensland, so down an hour out of Rockhampton, but we're rural contract fencers, so we're all over the place. So we're fencing up around Moranbah and out of Aramac. Yeah, so we travel wherever I work. As long as the property owner's okay with me carrying a firearm, I will.
Yeah. So, how do you guys feel? This is what we've got coming in next week in WA. If you are a hunter, you will only be allowed to own up to five firearms. You need to provide purpose of use for each of those five. If you are a target shooter, you will allowed to own up to 10. So now we're not even talking about action. We're not talking about appearance. We're not talking about caliber. We're not talking about magazine rounds. We are literally talking about the number of firearms an individual can own in Australia in 2023. How did we get here? And how does that make you guys feel? Because for me, I have heirloom firearms from Italy and from my grandfather and my Irish side that I have to sit down and say, oh, well, unless I render them permanently inoperable and I can only take them out of the safe to hold them every now and then, they will not be a firearm anymore. But you try and explain this to a bureaucrat or a police officer or a politician, and they just don't care. They don't care. They don't understand. This is the law because the police said so. Zach, how would you feel if the government told you this is how many guns you can own?
Look, I'd be fuming. As a hunting perspective, you've got different calibers that do different things. Air rifles, great for small game. Rabbits, pigeons, birds, all of that type of stuff in semi-rural environments and sheds, all of that type of stuff. You got 22s, then you got smaller calibers for varminting, 223 and all of that type of thing. And then you got hunting rifles, whether, if you're hunting interstates, say like Victoria, where minimums are 270, and then you want to stretch things out, and use a 300 Win Mag or something like that to chase sambar. It's ridiculous that they're limiting the amount of firearms someone can own. We've proven ourselves as law-abiding firearm owners, yet we're being treated like criminals. It's disgusting.
As part of the announcement, they said they want to take 1 in 3 firearms off of people. That's how they're talking about it as well. They're not talking about it in terms of public safety or this or that. It's sheer numbers, because for some reason they're pushing the point that the number of firearms somehow correlates to public safety. Now we're talking about firearms that are stored in a safe. They know where they're stored. They can come into our house at any time and inspect our storage at whenever they want to. And now the boot of the state is getting tighter on shooters. So, Jock, what would you say if a politician, maybe keep it PG rated, what would you do if a politician or a cop came to you and said, sorry, mate, we've got to take a couple of guns off you to keep everybody safe?
Well, I honestly don't know what I'd say. Look, and this is something Zach and I spoke about. The fact that I'm actually pretty new to owning firearms. Like, I've worked at a lot of cattle stations and used a lot of firearms, but I've only had my own firearms since about, I think it was August last year, and I already own 7.
Yep. It's like a
and they're all
tattoo. Once
different.
you get one.
They're all different
Yeah.
calibers. They're all different jobs.
100%.
They're all like, I have a 22, a 12 gauge, a 223, a 308. Admittedly, I have 244s. That's just a personal thing. And then I have a 375 Winchester. And it's like, they're all very different calibers and purposes. And even the 44, one of them's a really nice 44 that, I wouldn't use for what I use the other one for. Like, the cheaper one that I bought, I run around with the dogs, and if I need that, like, especially when I was in the territory, you run into water buffalo or something, you might need that gun to really take care of a situation. And that particular gun's a gun that I'm not scared to get scratched, or I'm not scared to, if it gets blood on it or something, it's not really a worry for me. So I just can't wrap my head around. That was half of what I said in the video I made on TikTok, is just like everything's very different purposes. Why? And especially in WA, you have a big difference in game over there. You have rabbits, foxes, pigs, dingoes, donkeys, camels, and buffalo right up and around Kununurra. Like,
Mm.
they scrub bulls. Like, I think there's even deer in WA, isn't there?
Mm-hmm.
Like, there's a massive
There is,
plethora of game, and they all take a very different firearm. Like, you know, I've personally shot camel with a 223, but I don't think it's the caliber everyone should take to shoot a camel, because it's not the caliber everyone should use. Like,
Mm.
yeah.
Yeah, Ozzie,
Yeah,
what are your
that's-
thoughts on the gun limits? We just heard Jock explain that he needs. We tried to explain this to the police minister, but he said, "Oh, we don't have those kind of game animals here." It's like, obviously he's never been out of Perth. Like, what did you think when you heard of limiting Australians to how many firearms we can own in 2023?
First of all, sorry if my connection's not good. I've been
That's
getting
fine.
notifications from Telstra about they're upgrading the network, so I've hopefully rejoined at the right time now. So yeah, sorry if it suddenly goes out, guys. I don't know why this is going
Starlink
on,
is
but
way
yeah,
better than Telstra.
They're hacking us. They're
yeah,
hacking us.
it's just no, my phone has just been terrible the last week since I've been doing the upgrade, so apologies there. For me, it doesn't surprise me, because what you've got to look at is they're not very smart. They do give this away. Like if you look, for example, when you apply for a permit to acquire, for how many years have we now been having a problem when you apply for a permit to acquire for a second or third of the same caliber? So therefore, they give it away with what they really want through policy, because they can't change the legislation at that point in time. So they give away their intentions very openly in their policy. So that's one thing that people have got to be very aware of. If you start seeing policy changes, that's where they're going to legislate. So with regards to limiting firearms like that, it doesn't surprise me whatsoever, because as far as they're concerned, they don't want any of us out hunting. They're trying to basically restrict all hunting and just have feral pest controllers go out and do that. And they want the only place that you can discharge a firearm legally is at an approved range. They only want farmers to have firearms in very limited circumstances, and that's being a single shot firearm. And how I know this is because I still got the documents back from 2003 at the Australian Police Ministers meeting, where they put then forward what their actual proposals were that they wanted. And they wanted, in category A and B, they wanted single shot or no more than 2-round capacity, so you break action, under and over, side-by-side shotguns. Everything else was going to C and D. So it doesn't surprise me. And, you know, people say, oh, Aussie, you're so over the top with it. No, I'm not, because I've seen it happen, and I've watched it happen ever since 1996. Like, people are delusional. They think that these people are just going to call it a day and go, well, now that we've just got it restricted to 5 firearms for hunters and 10 firearms for sport shooters, we're just going to call it a day, walk away, we're all happy. No, they're not. It's going to decrease and decrease as the years go on. They will then make it harder and harder for calibers. What they will go down the line, they'll restrict it all, and 308 will be the highest that you'll be able to have caliber wise. Then when they've got that, then it'll go down from there. Oh, 308 only in exceptional circumstances, and you'll have to basically do a category D application just for the caliber of 308. And then it'll go down and down and down until you have nothing left. And that's how they work. So it doesn't surprise me whatsoever.
It's all feeling a bit doom and gloom, but I feel like it's going to get a lot worse. It's going to get a lot worse. All we're talking about is all that they've publicly put out there, what they're going to bring in next week in WA. Some other things that they have been talking about as well is whistleblower laws coming in. So kind of like the red flag laws in America. So if you think your neighbor, for example, shouldn't have or might be acting in a certain way and they have firearms, the police want a mechanism for you to ring up and report. Now, the problem with this is the same problem that can happen in relation to domestic violence charges. It can be done in a sinister way and used to disarm someone out of spite, not out of protection. So What do you guys, and I'll start with you, Jock. I don't know if you've heard about these red flag laws that they're bringing in. What do you think of that kind of approach where you dob in your neighbour if you happen to know they have a gun?
Like I follow a few guys on YouTube, specifically over in America, and they talk about this, and I thought about it, and I thought it was pretty scary. You know, the likes of Zach getting hated on for the cat incident years ago. Someone could literally dob him in because they hate him over that and say that he's a risk to the public, and these red flag laws would take his guns off him. It's like, so what? When not literally, you would end up to a point where vegans in particular would try and weaponize that against hunters. Like target
Well,
shooters might be a little bit safer in that regard, but hunters, like, that's a scary prospect, I think.
What happened with the cat incident, Zach?
So I did some pest control on a private property up in the Riverland here in South Australia, and shot a few feral cats with a bow with one of my mates who had access to the property. And, you know, as people do, they posted we posted the photos up on Facebook and Instagram, and they just blew up in the anti-hunting scene and got doxxed by Anonymous, and had cops rock up to the house and ask questions about it and all sorts. You know, at the time I had an alias on Facebook, so nothing to do with my actual last name to do with any of it. But yeah, still had cops rock up and question me about it because they were getting reports that I was shooting cats in the middle of Adelaide and stuff like that.
Wow. Okay. What do you think about the red flag laws? I'm just going to call them what they are. They're calling them whistleblower protection laws here, but it's not. It's red flag laws like America.
Yeah,
talk to,
me
or?
personally, I
Oh, either of you. Oh, Zach, you go first while you're on a roll.
Oh, I don't know too much about them, so we'll let Ozzie go.
Yeah, go for it, Ozzie.
Yeah, I think it's like anything that when they try to push new legislation, there's always a very good intent that's pushed as the reason why they want that legislation. And for example, with that sort of thing, they'll push that the fact that a number of firearm owners in the US that went on killing sprees were actually monitored prior or known to police, but they had their hands tied. You know, we've heard that numerous times with a few of the shootings in the US. So whether we agree with that or not, this is where they push that kind of thing, and they you know, pull on the emotional heartstrings of people and say, well, you know, if you see a neighbor that's loading up his gun and you feel that he's doing something wrong, like, please call police, phone police. And, you know, there may be some rare instances where, you know, one of us may actually witness that, but you would phone anyway. And there are already set offences in place, like, for example, with people loading up a firearm magazine in their backyard in suburbia. Well, that's an offence straight away. You can't do that. So unless, of course, it was for the repair firearm, but even then, it's only under limited circumstances. So you see what I mean? Like, there's always laws that are already in place. But then the fact is, the society that we live in these days is just complete vindictive people, and they seem to be protected in the sense of when they make numerous false complaints, nothing ever seems to happen to them whatsoever. So, you know, we can basically sit there like a punching bag and you just continually cop it. But how do you sort of fight it? Well, the only way to fight, in my view, is at the ballot box, because there's politicians that make all these laws. And I know I do talk about the political stuff a lot, and I apologize in advance to it, but, you know, these people control our lives completely. Forget about firearms. I mean, you know, you can't light a fire without having permission from the government saying, Mother, may I? You know, you can't build a shed or any sort of, you know, dwelling on your own land without saying, Mother, may I? And obviously paying a fee to the government. You know, you can't go out fishing without paying a fee to the government, saying, Mother, may I? You can't have the dog of your choice without paying registration. There's just so much. And when you look at it, every single aspect of our lives is controlled by government. And this is why, for many years, especially when David Lionhelm was in, and, Kate, you'd be able to speak personally on this one. I was such a big supporter of his principle of minimal government. Provided you're not hurting anyone, the government has no right to intrude in your life. And I believe that firmly. It's a time that good people in society were rewarded for their years of law-abiding behaviour, and in particular gun owners. Why we are just the cheap alternate to tackling the real problem in society. We just get used as a punching bag. And look at what we're doing with the gun laws. We're cramping down on gun crime. That would be like me saying, okay, there's a problem with hoons on the Gold Coast here in Queensland, right? There's a problem with hoons, for example, on the Gold Coast, so it's okay. I'll just pull over mum and dad out at Ipswich, issuing fines or cramping down on them. Like, how does it actually fix the problem? And this is the thing that I have the greatest problem with, is I'm just sick of being targeted all the time. And there's only so much of that you can take before you either, one, give it away, or two, you actually go, you know what, I'm going to stand up for myself here, and I'm going to be more vocal, and I'm going to let my feelings be known, especially at the ballot box. Case in point, look at what happened with the voice to Parliament. Look how many of the silent majority have stood up now, and they've just had a gutful of all the lies and deception, and there seems to be a push globally on that front now. So, fingers crossed. Hopefully, there's a bit of hope for all of us out there yet.
Yeah, I agree. I was going to ask your opinion. Yeah, go for it, Jock.
I was just thinking about the red flag laws on their face value. It doesn't even make sense on face value, because you think about it, especially as a guy, you build up the courage to talk to someone about, hey, I'm not in a good headspace. And then they go and report you, and you get all your guns taken off you. The cops are just left with all your guns. They've left the road, they've left the car, they've left the grog. But this is supposed to save you? Like, fucking doesn't make any sense.
Yeah. Yeah.
If you look at, if I can just jump in there, like if you actually have a look at the stats pre-96 to post-96 with suicide rates, for example, and this is one thing that the anti-gun lobby always use, and they always say that suicides, have been reduced by ridiculous. No, there's a technicality with that. With firearms, yes, they were reduced, but the amount of suicides have actually gone up ever since 1996. Now, and that's the thing. It would appear, just on what you were saying there, that's a perfect example. They take your firearms. What about knife, overdose on pills, get on the grog, take a heap of prescription medication, either overdose that way or whatever other method of suicide now. And those methods continue to be very, very high to this day, according to the Australian Bureau of Statistics. So, so it proves that they are just so fixated on the emotional catchphrase of gun is bad, that they'll do things like that when they really, in my view, they don't care about your well-being and your safety, because if they did, they'd remove you as well and put you in a place of safety where you couldn't access any pills, alcohol, knives, rope, and every other method that people have used to commit suicide in Australia.
Yeah, the other
Just
thing
look at
that...
how many cops.
Sorry, go Zach.
Just look at how many cops kill themselves on the job. Like, they do that many mental health screenings and all of that stuff. And there was an article the other day about a guy who'd been out of the school for 3 months and killed himself in the cop car out the front of the station. Like, there's no way to control this type of thing. It's going to have, if someone's going to do something, they're going to do it whether they have access to firearms, cars, no matter what. Like, it's ridiculous.
The two highest employment groups of suicide is, believe it or not, police and veterinary surgeons, people who fix up animals. It's very, very. When I read that, I was like, wow, that's not something I expected, because farmers as well. But believe it or not, veterinary people.
I would have assumed farmers there.
Yeah.
That's why we're talking about mental health. That's another thing they're bringing in here is mandatory annual mental health checks for all shooters. And I spoke about this on your podcast, Zach. Now, there's so many. That is a can of worm. The medical establishment don't want it, or they will say they will not rubber stamp anyone because they don't want to be liable if they approve a gun license. And then the next day, the person they said was all cheery went out and does something terrible. So it seems to me that they're creating all these hoops and making it harder and harder and disincentivizing a generation of Australians to get involved in shooting, get involved in hunting by putting all these rules in that just make it impossible. I mean, mental health is such a fluid thing. Some days are better than others. I went to the range today and I woke up feeling a bit blue. It's been a bit of a rough week. This voice stuff has really got me down. Thank God it didn't get through. I'm feeling a bit happier. But I went out to the range, was around all these nice blokes. That was my happy place. That to me is Jason Spencer from Hunt Catch Cook calls it church, Sunday morning at church. This is part of our mental health and well-being. The government want to use that against us to say, actually, no, you can't have a license because the doctor said on this day, Kate, you didn't pass this particular test. And just another thing that I don't know if you guys know, they are going to bring in annual tests on top of that for anyone aged over 80. So if you're an 80-plus-year-old shooter, there's going to be another hurdle that you have to get. Now, at the range today, there was a guy there probably pushing 80. He was out shooting everyone, and he was talking about it with everyone. But he's got to do more tests than the guy who's just out there who's turned 18. Well, that's what they're creating in Western Australia.
It's ridiculous.
Yeah, first reacts. What do you guys think of that?
It's bloody ridiculous. You don't have to do mental health checks to drive a car, and you see the amount of crime that's committed from a car, whether it's hooning around or robberies and shit like that.
They're going to use the pilot's test. People who fly planes. That's the mental health test that they want to put on shooters. That's the mentality of the Labor government in Western Australia. They're treating us like potential killers. Seriously. Ozzie, what? I know you're not surprised, but what do you think about that?
Look, I don't know if you guys saw the article that Shooters Union covered here in Queensland. Now, they did a video on it as well. One of their members had committed suicide, and he had been battling mental health for some time. And Graham Park, the president of Shooters Union, actually sat down with the widow of the guy who had committed suicide, and she said for many months he wanted to reach out to mental health professionals, but was that frightened that they'd take away his firearms license, so he never did. So, and the result of that was that he had committed suicide. So, so my thought on all of that is that they created this through the various firearm registries where they have frightened shooters into reaching out for help. And what could start off as just a small spot fire, so to speak, for a better term, that could perhaps be completely extinguished before it develops or manifests into something a lot larger where they're looking at hurting themselves or other people. So when I look at the mental health stuff, it is just ridiculous that there is annual mental health screening, because what's going to happen if, for example, someone is okay, but then in the preceding 12 months at some point in time, things aren't okay, but they're too frightened to reach out. But then it gets really bad and they themselves or someone else. Well, what is the government going to do then? Are they going to have 6 monthly checks? Then when the same thing happens again, be down to monthly checks? Then what if that doesn't work? Weekly? Daily? Like what's the limit here? That'd be the question I'd be asking, because in certain areas it's impossible to legislate something out of existence. So in other words, you can't legislate someone doing something wrong with a firearm out of existence. I mean, even if you banned all firearms from civilian ownership, criminals would still have them. They would still obtain them, and they'd still do So my view on all of it is you just have to have a healthy balance between community safety and not infringing on the rights and enjoyment of good people in the community. So, getting back to your point there about what do I actually think of that, if they wanted to do a mental health screening, my argument back on them would be, well, wouldn't that come up in one of the police checks? Like if you'd been a risk of hurting yourself or others, surely there'd be a police record of that somewhere where someone's made a complaint, or your actions have drawn the attention of police or people in the community. So who are they to then put that responsibility back on you, that you've got to prove to them that you're of sound mind? Well, hang on, you are of sound mind because you haven't done anything wrong. So once again, that's that overreach. It's always an overreach. And, once again, it goes against what the government themselves promote about mental health. And what do they always promote about mental health? Don't stereotype people with mental health. Just because someone has mental health, they can be employed, they can be accepted at the sports club, they can do this, they can do that, and it's about inclusion and all this lovely rosy catchphrases and everything. But not when it comes to a firearms owner. No. If you've got mental health, it must be a type of mental health where you're going to hurt yourself and possibly hurt others. That's the black cloud that hangs over all of us that they seem to put on us. And that's wrong, because I look, just for the record, I'm not a mental health professional. I have no psychology or degree or anything like that. But there's various mental health issues out there. Like, because someone suffers from mental health, what if, for example, they suffer, I don't know, perhaps some sort of anxiety, and they find it overwhelming when they go out to a place where there's a lot of people? Just a hypothetical. What if that is a genuine problem that they have, but they never ever have once ever threatened any violence to anyone or tried to harm themselves or anything like that? So with these laws that that you're talking about in WA, is that then going to go against no mental health professional will sign off on their suitability to have a firearm? So this sort of there's all these sort of questions there, because everyone is saying on one hand, oh, it's inclusion with people with mental illness. There should be no stigma. But then on the other hand, no, there's a little asterisk, unless, of course, you're a gun owner. Well, we're going to throw every bit of stigma and exclude you as much as possible until you basically give up your chosen sport and hobby. And it's completely wrong in my view.
I think you've just hit the nail on the head, Ozzie. If they're painting someone with a gun, if they have mental health problems, they are potentially violent just because they own a gun. That is so offensive on so many levels. And I remember when being gay or transsexual, that was considered a mental health issue. So now we're living in a world where, okay, it's okay to be out there and the drag queen story time, whatever, as long as you're not hurting anyone else, is my view. But if I'm a shooter and I have mental health, you're going to say, oh, I'm potentially violent just because I have a gun? That is where we are at in Australia. To anyone listening, like, we are going to put this out there. This is a very interesting conversation, but I think you've just hit the nail on the head, Ozzie, and that disgusts me. That disgusts me.
I think it even goes deeper than that. Like in 96 or 7, whenever the laws came in, I was too young to remember. They acknowledged in the new laws, like, you have to be, mental illness is in gun legislation throughout. And they never actually did anything then about the mental illness. They knew that was the root cause of these guys going and shooting up places. But they never did anything about it then. Like, I think that if we'd have started in 1996, mental illness would be such a small thing in Australia. Like, if we'd have actually put half the money that we did into taking guns off everyone into mental illness, imagine where we'd be.
100%.
Yeah,
like, that's one that I always found funny. They fully acknowledged it, but they just never did anything about it.
it's just the constant stigma of owning firearms. They're trying to deter as many people as possible because, mate, they're not silly. The bean counters in it, weapons licensing, and the firearms registries around Australia, they know how many people are getting into shooting, and they want to stop that. So they couldn't stop people because people have a right to apply for a license. Everyone has that right. So they couldn't stop people from applying for a license. So what do they have to do to deter it? Well, use the emotional shaming of it. Let's make gun owners, let's paint them to be bad. Let's dramatize mass shootings for the US and talk about gun owners, and those gun owners got their guns legally, and this could happen here, because every time there's a mass shooting in the US, we have the clowns here at Gun Control Australia calling for more laws here, even though we've had no incident to justify any more restrictions, but they still use it because they dance in the blood of victims. That's what they do. As I've put out on my channel a number of times, they actually have a handbook. I'll send you guys a link to it. It's on my Facebook page. They have a handbook, and it talks about how to exploit gun tragedies and to dance in the blood of victims. That's exactly what they talk about. And that's what they do to try to create that stigma and that hatred towards all of us. But the thing is, I do smirk a little bit here because, their smoke and mirrors isn't working to the degree of there's a lot of people continuing to apply for a license and taking up shooting. But what does concern me is what's happening in WA now, because look at most of Australia, except for Tasmania, everyone's gone Labor left, and they're going to talk to one another. And my feeling, I don't have any concrete evidence on it, but I think here in Queensland, we're going to be next. We're going to see new proposals, and I would guesstimate that they will come out next year, just in time for re-election.
Yeah, I've heard rumours about Queensland being next, so let's
well,
I
know you guys have all spoken about this publicly. They're going to use WA as the example, as the shining light. Oh, look how good their gun laws are. We'll just copy and paste them. Oh, look, and now suddenly we've gone even further backwards than 96. And our whole culture and our sport and our traditions and our hunting skills have been eradicated 96 to 2023. Like, I don't have kids. I know you've got kids, Zach. I don't know about you two blokes, but I, at the range today, there was a mum, dad, and their daughter. That's what they do on Sunday, out for the range. It was a wholesome family activity. And then they went to McDonald's after. I mean, it's the same as going out and kicking a footy around, but less dangerous because we have no injuries in our sport. The only injury I've ever heard of is someone tripped over a broken tile at the range. That's the biggest injury I've ever seen in the shooting world in my time, because we can't afford to have any accidents. So we're very safety conscious people. So to me, it's the government deliberately misrepresenting our sport, our hunting traditions, and our culture to convince the rest of Australia, who are too apathetic or just simply don't care, to say, oh, well, we'll just get rid of that section of society and what they do and everything will be okay. Just leave it up to us. We'll look after you. Do you think
that's another one that bugs me?
It is true. I mean, I find probably with that one of the best arguments that I've used with numerous politicians that I've gone and sat down with, when they talk about, oh, well, they'll give an example of a legal gun owner doing something wrong. And I just come back at them and say, okay, let's have a look at how many politicians do something wrong. So, because what are you going to do? You're going to take 1 million licensed shooters and say there's 5, or say that there's even 50, right? Let's go higher, or even 100. 100 people out of those 1 million have done something wrong. What 100%. Other group of people in the community can stand there so proudly and say, this is how many of us are abiding? And I don't care, like I've said before, whether it's you want to take, like was mentioned before, take like police. Have a look at how many police have been charged with criminal offences. Let's have a look at doctors. Let's have a look at nurses. Let's have a look at all different professions. and actually compare the statistics of licensed gun owners with all the scrutiny and everything that we go through, and let's compare that to other people out there in the community, and let's see if there's a big difference in the percentage and the ratios of how many of us actually do something wrong. It's completely negligible. And it is impossible, as I say, to completely legislate your way out of, in my view.
Well, my answer
Yeah,
to
that's
them is,
it.
why are you going to blame me for the actions of someone else? I'm an individual. Please stop with the collectivist approach. But you're Aussie and Kate for Prime Minister and Deputy Prime Minister. No, I'm never
Let's
running
go.
for office again. I'm never running for office again. I'm done. Politics is a nasty business. I'd rather be on the outside throwing stones and rocks and whatever at Parliament House next week. Maybe we'll see what they come up with. Sorry, Zach, what were you going to say?
No, all good. Like speaking about the whole kid thing, like age restrictions on getting kids into firearm, like shooting and firearms, is ridiculous around Australia. You know, it changes so much, but you know, it decides that it's time to teach their child when to shoot. That it should be it's no one else's issues. You know, people like farms and that they teach their kids how to drive at a young age on the farm, on the property. There should be no issues with doing the same thing with firearms as well. It's a safety thing. You know, being around farms and that, firearms are a part of farm life, so they should know how to use them if they need to.
Well, I think all Australians should know how to use them. I think all Australians should be taught basic firearm safety handling if they want to. I'm not for forcing anybody, but just a basic. This is how you handle a firearm. This is what you do to make sure it's safe and not loaded. That should be, everyone should know that, because that would actually create a safer society.
Yeah.
That's it.
Yeah, exactly right.
And then jumping back to like the scrutiny. Oh, sorry, Jock, go on.
No, I was just agreeing here.
Yeah, and then jumping back to like the scrutiny side of things, like Queensland, you can lose your license if you have too many speeding fines, or if all of those types of things. It's ridiculous. There's that many stupid laws that scrutinise shooters and firearm owners. You know, I've tried to get a few workmates and some of our customers to get their firearms license, and they've sent in and they've been rejected because when they were 17, they got busted with some weed. Like it's ridiculous. Like laws like that are holding people back. You know, haven't done anything wrong since, but they were 17 and got busted with some weed. Like there's no issues with.
The fellow I work for got done at 15 with a crossbow, just for possessing a crossbow in Queensland, and he's nearly 30.
And he's
he
banned for life.
owns 5,000 acres that he has to legally manage the pest on, and he can't possess a gun license.
That's ridiculous.
Yeah. Look, I can talk from experience in '96. The amount of guys who were my father's generation back then that refused point blank, to comply with the new laws, and a lot of them just gave up their firearms, and that's the exact reason, because even back then they could see the way that it was going, and they just weren't going to be a punching bag for environmental gun laws from the government. That was very much their feeling on it. And I remember at the time, having to get rid of my 1022, and it hurt like hell getting rid of that, because I'd worked really hard to get it. And it was funny because, there was a collection centre at Pineapple Street at Zilmere here in Brisbane, and standing in line there, there was a barrel that you point your firearm into, make sure that it was clear, unloaded, and then they'd have police there, and they're writing down the details and everything like that, and then they'd get put, into a drum behind the makeshift counter that they had there. It was funny, I didn't see any, criminal gangs or anything like that handing their firearms, but what I did see at the time was a very close friend of mine. He had, he's now retired. He'd been in the ambulance service his entire life, retired as a commissioner, assistant commissioner. So he went fairly high up and, dedicated his entire life to helping others. His father, who was a World War II veteran, on his 21st birthday, gave him a semi-automatic 22. And, that was back then when you 21, you got the key to the house. That was a real old school mentality. And he was given 22 semi-auto as a gift from his father, who was a returned serviceman. He handed that firearm over and he was weeping as he handed that firearm over and just shaking his head. I don't understand, and this is what makes me so annoyed is like you look at that and you go, there was just good people handing in firearms that had such value to them. And all for what? A semi-auto 22. I mean, look at what's happened in New Zealand there, with their revamp of their gun laws. They still allow the equivalent of Category C over there as Category A. So your semi-auto rimfires and your semi-auto shotguns up to 5 rounds. And we had people from our firearms registries go over there to advise them on the gun laws, and you're just scratching your head going, well, why can't we have that here? There's just so many unanswered questions, and there's so many issues in the laws, as a lot of us know. And yeah, it's really disappointing to see, because I've only witnessed over the time good people losing their own property, being forced to hand over their own property that they've worked for, and all for what? Like, do we see any reduction in the crime there? Every time we turn on the news, someone's being held up with a firearm. There's home invasions galore here in Queensland. Every time you look at the news, they're talking about the youth crime situation. There's not enough prisons or space in prisons to hold them. People have had enough, just in general. So I look at it and go, well, what did you really achieve with these so-called world-class gun laws?
More power and control over the people, I think, is the cynical answer. That's why I'm so passionate about it. I remember 96 as a child. My dad had to hand back some very valuable firearms to him personally, like heirloom firearms. And he wouldn't hurt a fly. He's my hero. He's my mentor. That's why I'm a passionate shooter, and that's why I am this weapon that I am today. So you've got him to blame. I know I'm a thorn in the side of many shooting organisations, and some of the old guard don't like what I have to say, but too bad. What we've been doing hasn't been working. But it's punishing the innocent Australian who just wants to participate in their chosen hobby, who just wants to bring food home for mum to cook for the kids. That's like, we can use emotion too, because it is emotional to us. And hopefully, I know
100%.
boys are getting better at sharing emotion, but that's something I really want to do with this podcast, I suppose, is get these stories out there and show we're just everyday Australians. Like, we're not some kind of weirdos, and we're actually doing a public service. We're out there protecting our lands from like cats, like you were saying at the start, Jock, and Zach, with your bow hunting. You're teaching your kids these skills for the future. And Ozzie, oh my God, you're just a legend in everything that you've done for the sport and the community. So we're running up to the hour. I wanted to say thank you for coming on my little show. Have you guys got any last words? So next week, WA gun laws, or by the time I put this out, it will be tabling on the laws will be on the table. Any advice for shooters? And I know we like taking pot shots. My advice would be just look after each other, especially we talked about mental health. Don't be afraid to lean on each other. We don't need the government to come and help us, or the police reporting each other. Just turn to your friends. Like, we're a community. We can look after each other. That's my advice. Zach, what have you got for us?
I'll just say, shooters, orgs and all of that, pull your finger out, work together, whether you disagree on certain things or not, find common ground, work together. And standard shooters and hunters, write to your MPs. You don't like a law, there's plenty of places that, like, plenty of organisations that do different letterheads, or even write your own letter, mail your MPs and pull your finger out. We all sit here complaining, but, Firearms Owners United just done a campaign for Suppressor September, and we had, 15, 20 entrants. Like it's ridiculous. Firearm Owners United have 60, 70,000 people on the Facebook, and we had yet that many entrants. It's ridiculous. Pull your finger out and fight for what you like.
Jock, please keep making your TikTok reels. They're awesome.
No, my advice would be try a new category shooting. I tried handgun for the first time the other day and was pleasantly surprised. It was interesting. I'd only ever used a couple of old revolvers, and through the landholder that I was working for, got to use a Glock, and it was really interesting doing like CQB style shooting. Obviously not CQB shooting, but yeah, it was really interesting and something different. So try a new style of shooting, and if you got room in the gun safe, put in another PTA.
Buy more guns. And Ozzie, what have you got
Yeah.
for us?
I would honestly say the best thing to do is put aside your own plans on the weekend and put somebody else first. In other words, take a new shooter out to the range, because that is the future. And if we don't invest in, especially younger shooters these days, there is going to be no future, because I'll die eventually. Well, hell, I've almost died a couple of times. So, but yeah, touch wood. I'm gonna be dead and gone, and others will too. And it's up to that younger generation coming through to take over the reins. So, my view on that whole thing is get young people into shooting. There is a lot of younger people out there. And I know, because I've personally experienced this, where they've messaged me and they don't have a license and they've asked for help on how to get into everything. All they need is one of us to take them by the hand and say, hey, this is how it's done, and show them the fun and say sport and hobby that shooting is, and if I can just quickly add a bit of advice with that, please, for people watching this, don't go introducing a new shooter and putting them behind a 308 and thinking that's so funny, watching the recoil and all the rest of it. It's not. All you're doing is damaging that person for good. And then there's another vote lost on our side of things. So, start them off on a 22. That you can still teach them the fundamentals, the principles of shooting. Obviously the safety aspect of it, because it applies to all firearms regardless of caliber. So, there's so much there that you can show them, and it's like ice cream. Once they have a lick, they'll be hooked for life. So, yeah, definitely, that's the way I look at it.
Love it. Or once you get one tattoo, you'll get many more. Just like my mum screaming at me still. Thank you so much for joining the discussion tonight. I really want to put one of these out once a week, and I'm sure I'll have you guys on again, because you've been also brilliant and have given
100%.
such different perspectives and unique opinions on the world of shooting. Thank you again. My name is Kate Fantanel, Lady Liberty. I had Zach, Ozzie Reviews, and Jock join me tonight, and I'll see you again soon. Thanks, guys.
Cheers, mate.
Thank you.